Nobody expected the wedding to end before the cake was even served. One moment, the ballroom was filled with laughter. The next, every guest sat frozen in silence as Alessandro Romano, the most feared mafia boss in New York, slowly rose from his seat. His eyes locked onto a plus-size waitress everyone had mocked all evening. Then he pointed directly at her and spoke 7 words that shattered the entire celebration. "Cancel the wedding. She deserves this place, not you." What nobody in that room knew was that the woman they had been humiliating all night was about to expose the ugliest truth hidden behind the bride's perfect smile. And before the evening was over, the most respected person in the room would no longer be the bride. It would be the waitress. Let's go back 30 minutes earlier. 30 minutes earlier, Sophia Bennett was doing what she always did, working quietly, staying out of the way, trying not to draw attention to herself. The wedding reception was being held at one of the most expensive private estates in the Hamptons. Everything about the evening felt larger than life. Crystal chandeliers reflected thousands of tiny lights across the ballroom ceiling. Fresh white roses covered nearly every surface. A string quartet played softly in the background. The scent of expensive perfume mixed with champagne and ocean air. To most people, it looked like a dream. To Sophia, it was just another shift. She adjusted the silver tray balanced on her arm and carefully moved between tables. Years of working luxury events had taught her how to become invisible. The wealthy rarely looked at the people serving them, and when they did, it usually wasn't kindness they offered. Sophia had learned that lesson long ago. At 29 years old, she had heard every joke, every insult disguised as advice, every comment about her weight, every reminder that women like her were not supposed to be noticed. But she had also learned something else. The opinions of strangers only had power if you handed that power to them, and Sophia stopped doing that years ago. "Excuse me, miss." An elderly guest smiled warmly as she refilled his glass. "Thank you." Sophia smiled back. "You're very welcome." Moments like that made the job easier. Small moments. Simple moments. Proof that kindness still existed. Unfortunately, kindness wasn't something everyone in the ballroom possessed. Near the front of the room, several bridesmaids stood, gathered around the bride. Sophia overheard pieces of their conversation as she passed. "Did you see what she's wearing? That designer must hate her." Laughter followed. The bride laughed loudest. Sophia kept walking, not because she didn't hear, but because she did, and because she recognized that tone immediately, the tone of people who enjoyed making others feel small. At the center of the ballroom sat Alessandro Romano. Unlike most guests, he wasn't drinking. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't networking. He simply watched, quietly, carefully, the way a man watched when he had spent his entire life studying people. Alessandro was known for many things: power, influence, fear. His reputation stretched from Manhattan to Miami. People lowered their voices when he entered a room. Yet tonight, he seemed strangely detached from the celebration around him. His gaze occasionally drifted through the crowd, observing, evaluating, noticing things others missed, including a waitress who seemed to be working twice as hard as everyone else. Sophia never noticed him looking. She was too busy trying to solve a problem that had suddenly exploded behind the scenes. One of the wedding coordinators rushed toward her. The woman looked completely overwhelmed. "Sophia, thank God." "What happened?" "The seating chart is a disaster." Sophia frowned. "What kind of disaster?" "The kind that gets people fired." The coordinator glanced around nervously. 3 guests switched tables. 2 place cards disappeared. Somebody moved assignments during setup. Sophia sighed sympathetically. Wedding guests and seating charts, always a dangerous combination. The coordinator shoved a small card into her hand. "I need you to help me." Sophia looked down, then froze. The card displayed a seat assignment at the head table. Her eyes widened. "There has to be a mistake." "I know, but I need 5 minutes. Sophia, please." Before she could protest, the coordinator hurried away. Sophia stood there staring at the card. A strange feeling settled in her stomach. This wasn't right. Not even close. But causing a scene would only make things worse. Taking a slow breath, she started walking toward the head table. Every step felt heavier than the last. The closer she got, the more attention she attracted. A few guests noticed first, then more. Conversations slowly faded. Heads began turning. Sophia suddenly became aware of every movement she made, every step, every breath, every stare. She reached the table. The empty chair remained waiting, right beside Alessandro Romano. For a brief moment, she considered walking away. Then she imagined the coordinator panicking even more. So she sat down. The reaction was immediate. A woman across the room nearly spat out her champagne. Someone laughed. Another guest whispered something that caused an entire table to turn around. Sophia felt heat rush into her cheeks because she recognized those expressions: shock, disbelief, judgment. The silent question hanging in every stare: what is she doing here? And then the bride noticed. At first, her smile disappeared, then her eyes narrowed, and for the very first time that evening, Sophia felt genuinely uncomfortable, because the look on the bride's face wasn't confusion, it wasn't surprise, it was humiliation, as though Sophia's mere presence at the table had somehow ruined something. And unfortunately, the bride was about to make sure everyone in the ballroom knew exactly how she felt. The bride's name was Victoria Kensington. She was beautiful, rich, perfectly dressed, and at that moment she looked as though someone had spilled wine across her custom-made wedding gown. Her eyes remained fixed on Sophia. The smile she wore for photographers never reached her eyes. Not anymore. The room continued buzzing with whispers. People glanced from Sophia to Victoria and back again. Nobody understood what had happened, but everyone knew they were watching a mistake unfold. Victoria finally leaned toward one of her bridesmaids. The woman followed her gaze. A second later, both women laughed. Sophia heard it, pretended she didn't. Then came the first comment. Not loud enough for the entire room, just loud enough to hurt. "I thought this table was reserved for guests." Another burst of laughter. Sophia lowered her eyes. Years ago, comments like that would have ruined her night. Years ago, she would have gone home and cried. But life had taught her resilience. People could insult her appearance. They could judge her weight. They could underestimate her. None of those things changed who she was. Still, it didn't mean the words didn't sting. Across the table, Alessandro Romano noticed everything. The laughter, the whispers, the way Sophia's fingers tightened slightly around her water glass. Most people would have missed it. He didn't. Because powerful people often revealed their true character when they believed someone beneath them couldn't fight back. And tonight, several guests were revealing exactly who they were. A waiter approached the table carrying appetizers. Sophia immediately stood. Instinct. Habit. She had spent years serving events like this, working, not sitting. The waiter struggled with a heavy tray. Without hesitation, Sophia reached forward and helped him steady it. The young man looked relieved. "Thank you," Sophia smiled. "No problem." The interaction lasted only seconds, but Alessandro noticed something interesting. The waiter looked grateful, genuinely grateful, Not because she was important, not because she was wealthy, but because she had helped. Most guests barely acknowledged staff existed. Sophia did, and that small detail stayed with him. Meanwhile, Victoria's irritation continued growing. She could feel attention shifting. Not toward her, toward the waitress. And she hated it. Victoria had spent over $2 million planning this wedding. Every flower, every table, every photograph. Everything had been carefully designed to showcase perfection. Sophia's presence disrupted that image, which made Victoria irrationally angry. A few minutes later, she stood to give a toast. The ballroom quieted. Guests turned toward the stage. Champagne glasses lifted. Victoria smiled brightly. The perfect bride once again. Thank you all for being here tonight. Applause followed. She continued speaking, thanking family, thanking friends, thanking business partners. Then her eyes drifted toward Sophia, and something changed. I'd also like to thank our hard-working event staff. Several guests nodded politely. Victoria smiled wider, especially those who seemed to enjoy the VIP experience. Scattered laughter echoed through the room. Sophia felt her stomach drop. The comment wasn't accidental. It wasn't subtle. And everyone knew it. More laughter followed. Some guests looked uncomfortable. Others looked entertained. Sophia simply sat there, quiet, composed, refusing to react. That bothered Victoria even more. She wanted embarrassment. She wanted tears. She wanted a reaction. Instead, Sophia gave her nothing. For the first time that evening, Alessandro found himself studying Sophia more closely. Most people in her position would have left. Most would have argued, defended themselves, created a scene. She didn't. She simply endured it, with dignity. And somehow, that impressed him. A few moments later, one of the coordinators finally rushed over. Her face turned pale the moment she saw the tension surrounding the table. She immediately realized what had happened. The seating chart mistake. The whispers. The bride's comments. Everything. I'm so sorry, she whispered to Sophia. Sophia offered a small smile. It's okay. No, it's not. It was an accident. The coordinator looked ready to cry, but Sophia surprised her. Really? It's okay. The woman stared at her. Most people would have been furious. Sophia wasn't. And once again, Alessandro noticed, because truly kind people were rare, especially people who remained kind after being humiliated. The coordinator hurried away. The music resumed. Conversations restarted. But something had changed. Alessandro Romano no longer saw Sophia as a random waitress. Now he was curious, very curious, and before the night was over, he would discover a truth that connected their lives in a way neither of them could have imagined. The longer the reception continued, the more uncomfortable Victoria became, not because Sophia was causing problems. In fact, Sophia had done everything possible to avoid attention. That was exactly the problem. Despite all the ridicule, people were starting to like her, and Victoria could see it happening. An elderly couple asked Sophia about the flowers. A young server laughed at one of her jokes. Even several guests who had mocked her earlier seemed less interested in laughing now, because the more they watched Sophia, the harder it became to dislike her. And Victoria hated that, especially when she noticed Alessandro watching, not staring, not flirting, watching, observing, interested. For the first time all evening, Victoria felt something she hadn't expected. Jealousy. Not romantic jealousy. Social jealousy. The kind that appears when attention begins shifting away from you. She spent years making sure she was always the most admired woman in every room. Now a waitress was quietly stealing that spotlight without even trying. and Victoria couldn't allow that. A few minutes later, dinner service began. Sophia had finally left the head table and returned to work. Honestly, she couldn't have been happier. The farther she got from that chair, the better she felt. She returned to serving guests, refilling wine, clearing plates, helping staff, trying to forget the entire incident. Then she heard her name. Sophia. Her stomach tightened. Victoria. The bride stood near the center of the ballroom, surrounded by bridesmaids and guests. Dozens of people turned toward them. Sophia forced a polite smile. "Yes, ma'am?" Victoria held up an empty champagne glass. "Oh, good. You're back where you belong." Several people laughed. Sophia felt the words hit like a slap, but she kept smiling. "Would you like another glass?" Victoria tilted her head, almost disappointed by the lack of reaction. "You know." She glanced toward her friends. "I was honestly worried someone might think you were a guest." Another wave of laughter followed, this time louder, crueler. Sophia stood perfectly still. Years earlier, she might have cried. Tonight she refused. She simply took the glass. "Congratulations on your wedding." Then she walked away. The response caught everyone off guard, Victoria included, because once again, Sophia refused to become the villain. And once again, Alessandro saw everything. His jaw tightened slightly. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough. He had spent most of his life around powerful people, and one thing never changed. The truly powerful never needed to humiliate others. Only insecure people did that. A few tables away, the groom finally approached Alessandro. "Everything okay?" Alessandro took a sip of water. "Your bride enjoys embarrassing people." The groom laughed nervously. "That's just Victoria being Victoria." Alessandro's expression remained unchanged. That answer did not impress him. Not at all. Meanwhile, Sophia escaped into one of the service corridors behind the ballroom, the moment the doors closed behind her. She finally exhaled. The smile disappeared. Her shoulders dropped. For the first time all evening, the hurt reached her eyes. Not because she believed Victoria, but because she was tired. Tired of always pretending comments didn't matter. Tired of acting strong. Tired of being measured by her appearance before people ever learned her name. She leaned against the wall, closed her eyes, and took a slow breath. "Hey." A voice interrupted her thoughts. One of the younger waitresses approached. The girl looked upset. "They're awful." Sophia managed a small smile. "Some people are. You don't deserve that. No one does." The younger woman shook her head. "I don't understand how you're staying so calm." Sophia looked toward the floor, then gave an answer that surprised even herself. "Because if I let cruel people change who I am, then they win." The young waitress stared at her, speechless, unaware that someone else had just heard every word. Standing near the partially opened service door, Alessandro Romano remained completely still. He had come looking for a quiet moment away from the reception. Instead, he found Sophia, and what he heard unsettled him. Not because it was dramatic, not because it was emotional, because it was genuine. There was no audience, no performance, no attempt to impress anyone. Just a woman choosing kindness when she had every reason not to. And suddenly, a strange memory surfaced in Alessandro's mind. A hospital room, a frightened teenage girl, a woman whose face he had never clearly seen, a woman his younger sister once described as an angel. The memory vanished as quickly as it appeared, but the feeling remained. Something about Sophia felt familiar, very familiar. And for the first time that night, Alessandro stopped wondering why she had caught his attention. Instead, he began wondering where he had seen her before, and that question was about to change everything. Alessandro Romano wasn't a man who believed in coincidence. That was one of the reasons he was still alive. For years, he had built an empire by noticing details other people ignored, patterns, behavior, instincts, and right now, his instincts refused to leave Sophia Bennett alone. Back inside the ballroom, the music continued. Guests laughed. Champagne flowed. The wedding carried on. But Alessandro's attention remained fixed elsewhere. The image of Sophia, standing calmly in that service hallway, replayed in his mind. Especially her words. If I let cruel people change who I am, then they win. Most people talked about kindness. Very few actually practiced it, especially when they were hurting. Sophia had. And for some reason, it reminded him of someone, a memory he hadn't thought about in years. Without warning, his phone vibrated. A text message. His younger sister, Isabella Romano. The name alone softened something inside him. There were only 3 people on Earth whose safety mattered more to him than his own. Isabella was one of them. He opened the message. A photo appeared, a picture of Isabella holding her newborn daughter. A small smile crossed his face. Then another memory surfaced. Not a happy one, a terrifying one. 8 years earlier. The hospital, the accident, the night he almost lost her. The memory hit him with surprising force. At the time, Isabella had been only 21, a university student, full of life, full of plans. Then, a drunk driver ran a red light. The collision nearly killed her. Alessandro still remembered arriving at the hospital. The blood, the panic, the doctors, the uncertainty. For hours, nobody knew whether she would survive. And then there had been the woman. The stranger, the one Isabella never stopped talking about afterward. A woman who had stayed with her before the ambulance arrived. A woman who crawled into twisted metal despite the danger. A woman who held her hand, kept her conscious, kept her talking, kept her alive. The woman disappeared before anyone could properly thank her. No reward, no publicity. Nothing. Just gone. For years, Isabella referred to her as the angel, the woman who saved her life. Alessandro suddenly sat upright. A strange feeling crawled down his spine. The memory, the voice, the kindness, the familiarity. Could it be? Immediately he stood. Across the ballroom, his long-time security chief noticed. "Boss? I need a favor." The older man stepped closer. "What do you need?" Alessandro glanced toward Sophia. The security chief followed his gaze. "The waitress? I need her employee file." The man blinked. "You need what?" "You heard me." 5 minutes later, Alessandro stood alone on a balcony overlooking the ocean. The evening breeze carried the scent of salt water. His security chief handed him a folder. That's everything the event company had. Alessandro opened it. Sophia Bennett, age 29. No criminal record, no scandals, no lawsuits, volunteer work, community outreach, blood donor, animal shelter volunteer. He continued reading, then stopped, his eyes locked onto one particular entry. 8 years ago, Emergency Civilian Assistance Award, issued by Nassau County. Alessandro's pulse slowed. He read the report. Once, then again. The date matched. The location matched. The accident matched. And suddenly, everything clicked. Sophia Bennett was the woman who saved Isabella, the woman his family had searched for, the woman who disappeared before anyone could thank her. For the first time all evening, Alessandro looked genuinely stunned, not because she saved someone, but because she never told anyone. No social media posts, No interviews, no recognition, nothing. She simply walked away, as though saving a stranger's life was the most normal thing in the world. A slow breath escaped him. Most people spent their lives trying to appear good. Sophia simply was good. And the people mocking her tonight? They had no idea. At that exact moment, another voice interrupted his thoughts. "Alessandro?" He turned. Isabella stood behind him. She had arrived late to the reception. The moment she saw his expression, she frowned. What happened? Without a word, Alessandro handed her the file. She scanned the page, then froze. The color drained from her face. Her eyes widened. "No." Her voice barely emerged. "No way." She looked across the ballroom, toward Sophia, the waitress currently carrying a tray of champagne. The waitress everyone was ignoring. The waitress people had been laughing at all night. Tears immediately filled Isabella's eyes. "Oh my God." Alessandro remained silent. Isabella covered her mouth. "That's her." The words came out as a whisper. "Alessandro, that's her." For several seconds neither sibling spoke. They simply watched Sophia moving through the crowd. Completely unaware, completely humble, still working, still serving others, as though she hadn't changed their family's life forever. Then Isabella said something Alessandro would never forget. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "Not one person in this room deserves her respect more than she deserves theirs." Alessandro looked toward the head table, toward Victoria, toward the guests who had mocked her, toward the people obsessed with status. And for the first time that evening, something dangerous stirred beneath his calm exterior. Because now he knew the truth. And once Alessandro Romano knew the truth, he never stayed silent for long, especially when someone good was being treated badly. Unfortunately for Victoria, she was about to learn that lesson in front of everyone. Sophia had no idea her life was about to change. She was standing near the dessert station, arranging plates for the final course, when she heard her name again. This time, the voice carried across the entire ballroom. "Sophia." The room gradually quieted. A bad feeling immediately settled in her chest. Slowly she turned. Victoria stood in the center of the dance floor, microphone in hand, smiling, the same smile she had worn all evening, beautiful on the surface, cruel underneath. Around her, guests began paying attention. Some sensed entertainment. Others sensed trouble. Sophia sensed both. "Would you come here for a moment?" Victoria asked sweetly. Every instinct told Sophia to refuse, but she couldn't. She was working. So she walked forward. Each step felt heavier than the last. The ballroom grew quieter. By the time she reached the dance floor, hundreds of eyes were watching. Victoria tilted her head. "Everyone, let's give a little applause for Sophia." Scattered claps followed. Sophia forced a polite smile. She already knew this wasn't going anywhere good. Victoria continued, "You've certainly become one of the most talked-about guests tonight." Laughter rippled through the room. Sophia felt her cheeks warm. Guest. Not waitress. Guest. The reminder was intentional. Victoria wanted everyone remembering the seating mistake. Wanted everyone remembering where Sophia didn't belong, or at least where Victoria believed she didn't belong. "You know," Victoria continued, "I think it's inspiring." The room listened. Most people would feel uncomfortable sitting at a table filled with billionaires, CEOs, and world leaders. More laughter. A few people shifted uncomfortably. The joke was becoming difficult to ignore. But confidence is important. Victoria smiled directly at Sophia, even when it's completely misplaced. This time the laughter was louder, crueler. Sophia stood frozen, Not because she didn't know what to say, because she realized Victoria genuinely enjoyed this. She enjoyed hurting people, and somehow that made Sophia feel sad for her, more than angry, just sad. Victoria stepped closer. "So tell us, Sophia." The microphone moved toward her. "What's it like pretending you belong among people like us?" The ballroom fell silent. A line had just been crossed. Everyone knew it. Even the groom looked uncomfortable. Sophia stared at the microphone, then at Victoria, then at the hundreds of guests watching. For a brief moment, nobody spoke. Finally, Sophia took a slow breath. When she answered, her voice was soft, calm, steady. "I wasn't pretending." The room remained silent. "I sat where someone told me to sit. No anger, no sarcasm, no bitterness, just truth." Victoria's smile faltered slightly. Sophia continued, "And honestly," she glanced around the ballroom, "I never thought where I sat mattered nearly as much as how I treated people." The silence deepened. Several guests lowered their eyes, because they knew exactly who she was talking about. For the first time all evening, Victoria looked rattled. Sophia hadn't taken the bait. Again. And somehow that made the bride look worse than the waitress. Victoria quickly laughed, a forced laugh, an irritated laugh. "Oh, that's adorable." Then she said the one thing that changed everything. "Unfortunately, kindness doesn't buy a seat at this table." The words had barely left her mouth when another voice interrupted. Cold, deep, powerful. "Actually." The single word echoed through the ballroom. Every head turned, every conversation died. Even Victoria froze, because everyone recognized that voice. Alessandro Romano. Slowly. The feared Mafia Boss rose from his chair. The atmosphere changed instantly. 1 second earlier, people had been watching a bride mock a waitress. Now they were watching the most powerful man in the room step forward. Nobody knew why. But suddenly, nobody was laughing anymore. Alessandro walked across the ballroom, his expression unreadable, his movements calm, controlled, dangerously calm. He stopped beside Sophia, close enough that she could feel the presence radiating from him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Alessandro looked directly at Victoria. "Kindness," his voice remained calm, "is exactly what earns a seat at my table." A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. Victoria blinked, certain she had misunderstood. "What?" Alessandro never looked away from her. "You heard me." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The groom looked terrified. Several guests exchanged nervous glances, because they had never seen Alessandro publicly challenge someone before, especially not at a wedding. Victoria forced a laugh. "Surely you're joking." "I'm not." The answer came instantly. Ice cold. Final. Victoria's confidence cracked, for the first time all evening. She looked uncertain, and Alessandro wasn't finished, not even close, because now he was done watching. And everyone in the ballroom was about to learn exactly who Sophia Bennett really was. The ballroom was silent. Not the polite silence of a wedding reception, not the silence that followed a speech. This was something different. The kind of silence that appears when people suddenly realize they may have judged the wrong person. Victoria forced a smile, but everyone could see it now. The confidence was slipping, the control was slipping, and for the first time all night. She looked nervous. Alessandro stood beside Sophia, his hands relaxed at his sides, his expression unreadable. Yet somehow he commanded every inch of the room. Victoria laughed awkwardly. "Alessandro, surely this is being blown out of proportion." Nobody joined her laughter, not even her bridesmaids. That made her even more uncomfortable. The groom finally stepped forward. "Maybe we should all calm down." Alessandro slowly turned toward him. "I agree." Relief briefly appeared on the groom's face. Then Alessandro continued. "Which is exactly why I think everyone deserves to hear the truth." The relief vanished immediately. Victoria's stomach dropped, because something in Alessandro's voice sounded final, dangerously final. "What truth?" she asked. Alessandro looked toward Sophia, then back toward the crowd. 8 years ago. The room remained silent. My younger sister was nearly killed in a car accident. Several guests exchanged confused looks. Nobody understood where this was going. Alessandro continued. "The doctors told us she might not survive." Sophia frowned slightly, unaware of where the story was leading. "The only reason she lived long enough to reach that hospital," his gaze settled on Sophia, "was because a stranger refused to leave her side." The room became even quieter. Victoria's smile disappeared completely. Alessandro took another step forward. That stranger climbed into a wrecked vehicle. She ignored the danger. She stayed with my sister. She kept her conscious. She kept her alive. Sophia's eyes widened. Suddenly she understood. No, surely not. Alessandro looked directly at her. "It was you." The words landed like thunder. Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom. Sophia froze. Several guests turned toward her. Others looked shocked. A few looked embarrassed, very embarrassed, because they suddenly remembered every cruel thing they had said about her, every joke, every laugh, every whisper. And now they were staring at the woman who had once risked her own life to save another person. Sophia shook her head softly. It wasn't a big deal. The entire room stared at her. Alessandro almost laughed, not because it was funny, because only Sophia would describe saving a life as not a big deal. His sister Isabella stepped forward, tears already filling her eyes. For the first time all evening, people noticed her, and when she looked at Sophia, there was nothing but gratitude. "You saved me," her voice cracked. "You saved my life." Sophia looked overwhelmed. "I just helped." "No." Isabella wiped her eyes. "You stayed. You didn't know me. You didn't know who my family was. You didn't know I had money. You just stayed." The room remained completely silent, because nobody could argue with that. Not anymore. Then Alessandro delivered the blow that changed everything. "My family spent years trying to find her." Guests stared. Victoria stared. The groom stared. Alessandro continued. "Do you know what happened when we finally found her?" Nobody answered. Nothing. His voice hardened, because she never asked for money. Never asked for publicity. Never asked for recognition. She simply went back to living her life. Several guests lowered their eyes, ashamed, because now the comparison was impossible to ignore. Sophia had done something heroic. Silently, Victoria had spent an entire evening demanding attention, publicly. The contrast was brutal. Then one of the bridesmaids made a mistake, a very big mistake. She laughed nervously. "I mean, that's nice and all." Every head turned. The woman immediately regretted speaking. But it was too late. "But she's still just a waitress." The sentence hung in the air, deadly. Sophia looked down. The groom looked horrified. Victoria closed her eyes, because she knew exactly what was about to happen. Alessandro slowly turned toward the bridesmaid, and when he spoke, his voice became colder than anyone had heard all night. "No." The woman swallowed. "No." Alessandro shook his head. "She is a woman who saved a life." His gaze swept across the ballroom. "While the rest of you spent the evening proving how little character money can buy." Nobody moved. Nobody dared. because every word was true. Then the final crack appeared. The groom suddenly looked toward Victoria. A strange expression crossed his face. Confusion, then realization, then anger. Real anger. Because for the first time all evening, he wasn't looking at Sophia. He was looking at his bride. And what he saw disturbed him. Not the beautiful woman he thought he was marrying. Not the polished socialite. Not the perfect partner. He saw someone who enjoyed humiliating others. Someone cruel. Someone small. Someone he barely recognized. Victoria saw the change immediately. "Daniel." Her voice trembled. The groom stepped backward. Just one step. But it felt like a mile. The ballroom held its breath. Because everyone suddenly understood something. This wasn't about Sophia anymore. This was about the wedding itself. And it was beginning to collapse. Right in front of them. For several long seconds. Nobody spoke. The wedding reception that had been carefully planned for more than a year was unraveling in real time. And everyone could feel it. Daniel looked at Victoria. Victoria looked back at him. The distance between them wasn't measured in feet anymore. It was measured in truth, and for the first time, there was nowhere left to hide. "Daniel!" Victoria's voice trembled. "I can explain." But Daniel slowly shook his head. The disappointment in his eyes was impossible to miss. "Explain what?" The room remained silent. "Explain why you spent the entire evening humiliating someone who had done nothing wrong." Victoria opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Or explain why the kindest person in this room was treated like she didn't belong. Each question landed harder than the last, because deep down, Daniel already knew the answer. The woman standing before him wasn't who he thought she was, and that realization hurt more than any public embarrassment ever could. Finally, Daniel removed his wedding ring. The gesture was small, but the impact was enormous. Gasps spread throughout the ballroom. Victoria's face turned pale. "No." Daniel placed the ring on the table beside him. "I can't do this." The words barely rose above a whisper, yet somehow everyone heard them. "I don't want to spend my life with someone who enjoys hurting people." The silence that followed felt endless. Then Victoria began to cry. Not the tears of a woman who understood her mistakes. The tears of a woman who had lost control, lost the spotlight, lost the image she spent years building, and everyone could see the difference. Within minutes, guests began quietly leaving their seats. The celebration was over. The wedding was over. The illusion was over. But something unexpected happened next, one by one. People started approaching Sophia. An older couple apologized. A businessman apologized. Even a few guests who had laughed earlier lowered their heads and admitted they had been wrong. Sophia accepted every apology with the same grace she had shown all night. Not because they deserved it, but because bitterness had never been part of who she was. Across the ballroom, Isabella Romano finally approached her. The moment she reached Sophia, she wrapped her arms around her, tightly, without hesitation, without caring who was watching. Tears filled Isabella's eyes. "I've wanted to thank you for 8 years." Sophia looked overwhelmed. "You don't owe me anything." Isabella laughed through her tears. "That's exactly why you deserved everything." For a moment, neither woman spoke. And somehow, that quiet moment felt more meaningful than the entire wedding ceremony. Eventually, Isabella stepped back. Then she smiled, a genuine smile, the kind nobody had seen from Victoria all evening. "You saved my life." Sophia smiled softly. "I'm just glad you're okay." Several guests wiped tears from their eyes, because kindness like that had become rare. very rare. A few minutes later, Sophia gathered her things. The shift was over. The night was over. And honestly, she couldn't wait to go home. She adjusted her bag and started walking toward the exit. Then a familiar voice stopped her. "Sophia." She turned. Alessandro Romano stood a few feet away. For the first time all evening, there was no crowd around him, no business associates, no security team, just Alessandro. Sophia smiled politely. "I should probably get going." Alessandro nodded. "Probably." A brief silence followed. Then he surprised her. "Would you have dinner with me?" Sophia blinked, certain she had misheard. "What?" A small smile appeared at the corner of Alessandro's mouth, possibly the first genuine smile he had shown all night. "Dinner." He shrugged slightly. "A proper one this time." Sophia stared at him. The most feared man in New York suddenly looked almost nervous, which seemed impossible. "You barely know me." Alessandro looked at her for a moment, then answered honestly. "I know enough." The ocean breeze drifted through the open ballroom doors. The chaos of the failed wedding faded into the background. For the first time all evening, neither of them seemed interested in anyone else. Sophia felt herself smile, a real smile, the kind she hadn't worn all night. "Okay." Alessandro smiled back. And somehow, that simple word felt like the beginning of something neither of them expected. As they walked toward the exit together, Sophia glanced back one final time. Just hours earlier, she had entered the ballroom as someone nobody noticed, someone people mocked, someone people dismissed. Now she was leaving as the most respected person in the room, not because she had wealth, not because she had power, not because she had status, but because character always reveals itself eventually, and when it does, the people who judged you first are often the ones forced to admire you later. Sometimes the world doesn't recognize your worth immediately. Sometimes it laughs. Sometimes it doubts. Sometimes it overlooks you completely. But true character has a way of becoming impossible to ignore. And on a night that was supposed to celebrate a wedding, the most important love story turned out to be something else entirely. The story of a woman who never stopped being kind, even when the world gave her every reason